You know that terrifying, just stomach-dropping moment when your computer screen suddenly freezes?
Oh, absolutely the worst.
Right, the cursor stops moving, you get that little spinning wheel, and you realize, like, a massive mandatory operating system update has just triggered without your permission.
Yeah, and you're just sitting there completely helpless.
Exactly. And the absolute worst part, the thought that literally makes your blood run cold, is the realization that you haven't backed up your hard drive.
Oh, man. Yeah, you're just staring at this black glass, wondering if, everything that makes that machine uniquely yours is about to be wiped completely clean.
All your photos, your documents.
All those personalized settings you spent years tweaking, just poof,
Sure.
gone in a forced factory reset.
Yeah, and that right there, that is the threat of total erasure. And I know that you, listening to this right now, love uncovering hidden gems of knowledge. You're here because you love finding the profound in, well, completely unexpected places.
Which is definitely what we're doing today.
We really are. Today, we're looking at a deep dive into a story about the ultimate system wipe. But this reset isn't happening to a laptop.
No, it's happened to an entire ecosystem.
Right, and the source of this story is going to honestly completely shock you.
It is genuinely one of the most stunning literary discoveries of, I'd say, the last century. We're looking at a newly unearthed, fully realized, but entirely fictional manuscript written by Beatrix Potter.
Wait, like the creator of Peter Rabbit?
The very same. It's titled The Dwellers of Briar Howe.
Wow.
Yeah, it was written between 1938 and 1941, and it was actually found locked inside this heavy metal deed box decades after her death.
That is wild. And look, if you are picturing a quaint little children's tale about, rabbits in little blue coats stealing radishes from a garden, you need to leave that assumption at the door right now.
Oh, totally. This manuscript is massive.
It's incredibly quiet, very atmospheric, and it is a deeply, deeply dark exploration of survival.
Yeah, it completely abandons the whimsical anthropomorphism of her celebrated tales. What it retains is, well, her famously unsentimental, almost clinical regard for the harsh realities of the natural world.
Right.
But she takes those hyper-realistic animals and places them directly in the path of an impending, unavoidable environmental and existential threat.
And the mission of our deep dive today is to explore how this remarkable lost manuscript uses that terrifying threat to teach us about memory, about the mechanics of community, and about how to survive massive shifts in our own world. Okay, let's unpack this.
So to truly understand how the creatures of Briar Howe attempt to survive, we really have to look closely at the sheer scale of the threat Potter has designed for them.
Right, the setting itself is Briar Howe, which is described as this rugged, isolated fell.
Basically a high, barren hill or moorland up in the English Lake District.
Yeah, and we're immediately introduced to its oldest resident, Mrs. Juniper Thorn. She is this ancient, wise, and highly solitary brown hare.
She lives under the roots of an old hawthorn tree.
And she, along with a very young, highly anxious hedgehog named Nettle Burr, starts noticing these deeply unsettling environmental anomalies.
Potter builds the atmospheric tension brilliantly here, just by warping the natural order. It's only late September, but the fieldfares arrive weeks too early.
Which are strict winter migrant birds, right?
Exactly. And they are completely silent. Then the earth deep underground starts emitting these low-frequency cracking sounds.
Creepy.
Very. But the most disturbing anomaly centers around a small mountain lake, what the locals call a tarn. Flint's tarn is mysteriously sinking.
Right, the water level of the tarn is just rapidly draining away into the bedrock.
Yeah.
And on the freezing, exposed stone margin left behind, fresh, bright green water mint is spontaneously growing.
Which makes no sense.
It is flowering on freezing rock and completely defies the laws of biology. And these glitches in nature are all signaling the arrival of something the older animals simply call the turning.
And the turning is described in the text as a deep geological rearrangement of the world. Potter is very specific that this is not just a harsh winter.
Or like a passing storm.
Right. It is a fundamental shift in the deep structural reality of the land itself. The earth is basically changing its mind about what the valley should be.
And here is where the true horror of the threat reveals itself. Because the turning doesn't just bring minus 17-degree cold and bury their food supply.
No, it's so much worse.
It threatens to erase the creature's very identities. If they succumb to the cold and the psychological pressure of this event, they risk losing their speech,
Yeah, they undergo a forced neurological regression. They return to being simple animals.
Just biological machines driven entirely by base instinct.
Exactly. They lose their names, their histories, and their connections to each other. It is an existential memory wipe.
Like we said earlier, an operating system wipe.
Right. They don't just forget things. Your inner monologue, their consciousness is actively unspooled.
That is terrifying.
And Mrs. Thorn, the old hare, is the only creature alive in the valley who actually survived the last turning, which happened several generations ago.
She had to watch her contemporaries lose their minds and revert to wild beasts.
She did.
So going back to our opening idea, this turning is a massive mandatory update for the forest, threatening to wipe their hard drives clean. But I'm trying to categorize the genre we are dealing with here. Is this turning supposed to be like an evil supernatural curse placed upon the land? Or is this just an extreme, albeit fantastical, natural disaster?
You know, that distinction is the engine of the entire manuscript.
Yeah.
Potter makes it painstakingly clear that the turning is neither evil nor a curse.
Okay.
It have no malice. It's an impersonal geological process. There is a character later in the story who articulates this perfectly.
Oh, right, yeah.
He notes that the turning is change in its purest, most indifferent form. It doesn't hate the animals in the valley. It simply doesn't care that they exist.
Wow.
It's the indifferent machinery of the universe shifting gears, and the animals just happen to be caught in the cogs.
Honestly, an indifferent universe is so much scarier than an evil villain.
Oh, for sure.
Because a villain you can negotiate with or trick. You cannot trick a glacier.
No, you can't.
So faced with this completely indifferent cosmic machinery that wants to wipe their consciousness, Mrs. Thorn has to come up with a defense mechanism. But she doesn't dig a deeper burrow.
Nope.
She doesn't stockpile food. Her defense is entirely social.
Yes, she understands from surviving the previous attack, turning that physical isolation breeds psychological erasure. The creatures who huddled alone in their burrows during the last event were the first ones to lose their minds.
Because the isolation made them fragile.
Exactly. So her radical countermeasure is to organize weekly, mandatory moonlit gatherings on the exposed top of the hill.
Which is just wild to me.
Yeah.
She forces the neighborhood to have a block party in the freezing cold while a cosmic disaster looms.
Pretty much.
She demands the animals sit in a circle and share their personal histories, their family lineages, their stories completely out loud. And the attendees form this incredibly tense, mismatched group.
Highly mismatched.
You have Mr. Dodd, this gruff, highly practical badger, who lives in a massive underground den where he guards an ancient, smooth rock called the Telling Stone.
Which is supposed to be a physical monument to their history, but it's currently completely blank because the memories are fading.
Right. Then you have Mr. Doily Dock, the incredibly nervous patriarch of a massive rabbit family.
Right.
And then, at Mrs. Thorn's explicit invitation, Mr. Todd arrives, a literal fox.
Yeah, the invitation of the fox is the ultimate stress test of her social defense strategy.
He actually shows up to the circle, and he brings this chilling physical object, his dead mother's tooth.
Which is such a striking detail.
It really is. He places the tooth in the snow and tells the story of how she died during a previous turning, how her mind was hollowed out and erased by the indifference of the cold before her body gave out.
He uses the tooth as proof of his own memories. It's this shocking emotional vulnerability from a predator.
But I have to push back hard on Mrs. Thorn's leadership here.
Okay.
Let's look at this from the rabbit's perspective.
Okay, let's do it.
Isn't it incredibly naive or honestly borderline cruel to force a traumatized rabbit? A rabbit whose actual children were likely eaten by this exact fox to sit in a vulnerable circle with him.
I see what you're saying.
Right. Because in a crisis, the most logical thing is to stick to your trusted family unit, not invite your apex predator to the campfire.
It seems completely counterintuitive, and Potter anticipates that exact reaction. What's fascinating here is how she uses another character, an old visionary rabbit named Peggy Longears, to explain the underlying mechanics of why the fox must be there.
Peggy has this heightened perception, right, where she can literally see the invisible threads of connection between all the creatures in the valley.
Precisely. She sees the relationships as glowing, physical lines tethering everyone together, and Peggy observes that the turning targets the solitary creatures, the unattached nodes, first.
Like a virus looking for a weak spot.
Yes. It looks for the weakest threads to begin unspooling the valley. Mrs. Thorn understands that the predator-prey relationship, however brutal and painful it is to the rabbit, is an incredibly intense biological and historical tether.
Oh, wow.
It is a fundamental load-bearing connection that holds the entire ecosystem's fabric together.
So if you exclude the fox,
You don't make the rabbit safer from the turning, you actually leave a massive tear in the social and ecological fabric of the valley. And a tear is where the cold gets in.
that is heavy.
You have to anchor yourself to everything you're connected to, even the things that cause you pain, because that tension keeps you grounded in reality.
That is such a profound way to look at an ecosystem. The tension of the predator-prey dynamic is actually a structural pillar of their shared reality. You have to weave even your enemies into your network or the whole system crashes. But despite this radical attempt to weave a community defense, the winter deepens. It drops to -17 degrees. The snow is burying the hawthorn tree, and the psychological toll of this turning begins to violently tear at the edges of the valley.
Yeah, the onset of the memory wipes accelerates, and the way Potter writes this regression is genuinely heartbreaking. It's not a sudden poof of magic, it's a slow degradation.
Like with the birds.
Right, the wrens, who are entirely defined by their complex generational music, suddenly start losing their songs. They will be mid-phrase, trilling a melody their ancestors sang, and they just stop.
They just stare blankly.
Their eyes go dull, and they become just another wild bird.
The manuscript describes the voles as becoming pressed flat like drawings of themselves. That phrase is haunting.
It's beautiful, but so bleak.
All their interior depth, their hopes, their fears, their inner monologues, just gone. They become two-dimensional biological automatons.
And the emotional climax of this tragedy centers on Daughtery, the red squirrel. He has maintained this incredibly complex mental library of his family's nut caches across the fell for 11 generations.
And he completely loses his mind to the turning.
He forgets his own wife's name. He looks right at Hazel and feels absolutely nothing.
Oh, wow. That is so sad.
The grief of the animals who remain awake, who are fighting the turning, is palpable. They are actively watching their loved ones vanish from the inside out, while their physical bodies are still sitting right in front of them. It's a profound exploration of anticipatory grief.
Yeah, watching this happen to your community is essentially like watching a tragic ecological scale of Alzheimer's disease sweeping through the woods.
It really is.
And the sheer exhaustion of fighting it brings us to a character called the Doctor. He's this ancient heron who fishes the frozen stream at the bottom of the valley. And he introduces a completely different philosophy for handling the crisis.
Yes, the Doctor has watched countless seasons change. He explains to the desperate animals that the true wisdom of water is its absolute indifference. Right.
Water flows around obstacles. It changes form from liquid to ice. It takes the shape of whatever container it is poured into. It never resists.
So his advice is to just give up.
Basically, he suggests that yielding, actively letting go of their desperate attachments to their names, their histories, and their pain is the only natural way to survive the turning. If you stop caring, you cannot be hurt when things are taken away.
You know, I am going to vigorously defend the heron here. I think he is entirely right.
Really.
Yeah, look at the suffering around them. If the universe is doing a hard reset and your brain is being forcefully wiped, the most painful thing you can possibly do is try to grip onto the memory as it is being violently ripped from your hands. What certainly causes more immediate distress.
Right. Stubbornly clinging to the past is just causing them agonizing, unnecessary psychological torture. Dropping the rope, letting the memory go, and surviving as a simple animal makes complete evolutionary sense. It is ecological nihilism, sure, but as a survival tactic, it is flawless.
It is a flawless biological survival tactic, and Potter gives that argument incredible weight. The water's indifference is an undeniable truth of the natural world. But the heron himself concedes a deeper philosophical point. He admits to Mrs. Thorn that while water is ancient and indifferent, the act of caring is a truth older than water.
Older than water. The idea that emotion predates physical matter.
Yes. It is the absolute crux of the manuscript. The impulse to hold on, to stubbornly insist that a name, a song, a shared history, or even a painful relationship actually matters, is the very mechanism that makes them conscious beings rather than just meat and bone.
Right.
If they take the heron's advice and yield entirely to the turning, their bodies will survive the winter, sure, but they die spiritually. They cease to be vessels of meaning. They choose to become pressed flat.
They refuse to be just drawings of themselves. They choose the pain of consciousness over the safety of numbness.
Yeah.
And this ideological clash between the deep temptation to just let go and yield to the cold and the desperate, painful need to hold on culminates in a terrifying final gambit. It takes place on the winter solstice.
The longest, darkest, most dangerous night of the year.
A mismatched fellowship of 6 creatures decides they can no longer just sit on the hill and defend. They have to confront the turning at its geographic source.
You have Mrs. Thorn the hare, Mr. Dodd the badger, Nettlebur the hedgehog, a single surviving wren who still remembers a few notes, Peggy Longears the visionary rabbit, and Mr. Todd the fox.
They leave the safety of their burrows and journey through deep, treacherous snow up the fell to Flint's tarn. And the visual description of the tarn at the summit is completely wild.
It's so surreal.
It is. I want to shift away from the tech metaphors here, because staring at the tarn isn't like looking at a computer. It's like peeling back the Earth's crust and staring directly into the exposed, glowing nervous system of the world.
Beautifully put.
The lake is glowing with this cold, blue-white fire. The water is totally unfrozen, violently churning despite the sub-zero temperatures. And all around the rocky edge, there is this pulsing, black, root-like growth spreading out into the snow, anchoring the phenomenon to the physical world.
It's completely alien.
It is. And then Peggy Longears looks at the churning water and sees tens of thousands of those invisible threads we talked about earlier. They are rising straight up out of the glowing water, carrying the stolen memories, the lost names, the vanished songs of the valley, straight up into the dark sky.
It's a breathtaking, terrifying image. The landscape itself is acting as an extraction engine, actively pulling the consciousness out of the valley.
My initial thought reading that scene was that the tarn is essentially a giant cosmic vacuum cleaner.
Oh, sure.
Like it's just blindly sucking up their souls and shredding them into nothingness. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. What is it actually doing?
Well, that is exactly what the animals fear as they stand on the edge. But as Peggy studies the movement of the threads, the manuscript reveals something much more mechanically profound. It is not a vacuum cleaner. It is a loom.
Okay, wait. Explain the difference and how that functions for them.
So a vacuum destroys and discards. A loom is a mechanism of transfer and creation. The turning is not annihilating the memories of the valley.
It's not.
No, it is pulling the old threads of consciousness out of the animals and temporarily storing them mid-flight in the water. It is gathering all the raw data of their existence to weave a completely new, fundamentally different arrangement for the valley's future.
Oh, wow.
The memories aren't being deleted, they are being held in a transitional state while the new reality is constructed.
That completely changes the stakes.
Entirely.
Because if the memories aren't destroyed, if their history is currently suspended right there in the glowing water of the tarn, it means it can be retrieved. They realize they can literally dive into the cosmic machinery to rip their history back.
Precisely. And the creature who takes the plunge is Mr. Dodd, the heavy, highly practical badger who guards the empty telling stone back in his den.
He wades directly into this freezing, glowing, pulsing water.
He fights through the physical currents and reaches out with his badger mind to find one specific thread in the thousands. He is looking for the thread carrying the lost name of his neighbor, the squirrel Hazel.
But the moment he touches the water, the turning fights back. The water exerts this massive, crushing psychological pressure on Mr. Dodd.
It tries to forcefully unmake his identity, to strip away his name and his history to add him to the loom.
It demands that he yield to the indifference. And he starts losing. His mind starts slipping. He is physically drowning in the sheer indifference of the universe.
And to save him from being erased, Mrs. Thorn, standing on the frozen bank, performs the ultimate act of holding on.
What does she do?
She uses her voice to speak what Potter calls the sound shape of the valley.
Which, the mechanics of this are fascinating. It is described as a pure frequency of belonging. It is the acoustic signature of their shared history, their connections, their entire ecosystem translated into a single vibration.
It acts as an acoustic counterfrequency. The turning is emitting a vibration of geological change, and Mrs. Thorn meets it with the concentrated vibration of their shared existence.
So they clash.
Exactly. When those two frequencies collide, it creates a momentary standing wave. The cosmic machinery literally halts for a split second, jammed by the sheer assertion of identity.
And in that paused second, Mr. Dodd manages to pull Hazel's thread back from the loom.
He does. He emerges from the water, completely exhausted but fundamentally changed. He realizes that the turning is a blind force, but it can actually be persuaded to accommodate their threads if they hold on to them tightly enough together.
So what does this all mean? Did they actually defeat this cosmic force, or did they just temporarily delay the inevitable?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you realize that you cannot defeat change. The turning will happen. The seasons will cycle. The earth will shift. The old ways will inevitably pass.
Right.
But by refusing to let go of their interconnectedness, they forced the turning to weave its new pattern around their existing identities. They proved to an indifferent universe that shared history has its own gravity. The universe does not care, but community is a force of nature too.
Community has its own gravity.
Yeah.
That is incredibly powerful. And it brings this entire concept right back to you listening to this right now. Because we all face our own turnings, don't we? Massive systemic changes that we cannot control and cannot stop.
We face them constantly, the mechanics of the world shifting beneath our feet.
It could be a massive corporate restructuring that wipes out your entire department and erases your professional identity overnight.
Yeah, or moving across the country to a new city where nobody knows your name and you feel entirely unmoored.
Exactly. Or it could be these massive, sweeping cultural and technological shifts, like the rise of AI, or algorithms that dictate our reality, that threaten to erase our sense of individual self and turn us into simple, predictable, isolated data points. We risk becoming pressed flat, like drawings of ourselves.
And the profound lesson from the Dwellers of Briar Howe is that you do not survive these massive shifts by isolating yourself and waiting for the storm to pass. And you certainly don't survive by giving up and yielding to the numbness, no matter how tempting the heron makes it sound.
You survive by stubbornly, painfully holding on to your threads. Your stories, your people, your community. Even the people who irritate you or who you naturally disagree with. The tension of a rabbit sitting next to a fox is still a connection that keeps you grounded in reality. When the world tries to rewrite you, you have to gather together in the dark and remind each other of your names.
That's the only way.
And that leaves us with one final, deeply provocative thought to mull over. Remember the preamble to this manuscript. Beatrix Potter wrote The Dwellers of Briar Howe between 1938 and 1941.
Such a specific window of time.
Think about what was actually happening in Europe and in Potter's world at that exact moment in history. The looming, terrifying, entirely impersonal machinery of World War II was activating,
Totalitarianism was sweeping across the continent.
systematically threatening to erase entire cultures, rewrite histories, and unmake identities. It was a massive, devastating, real-world turning. Makes you wonder, was Potter writing a profound allegory for what she was watching unfold?
It's hard not to see the parallels.
Was she looking at the terrifying threat to totalitarian erasure and suggesting that the simple, radical act of gathering together to remember our names, to fiercely protect our shared history, isn't just a comfort, it is the ultimate, most vital form of resistance? Think about what your own threads are connected to. What stories, what people are keeping you from being erased? What does your own telling stone hold today? Think about it, because the turning is always coming. Make sure your history is anchored by the people who know your name.